And for those who come in late, you just direct them to the front row. Just bring them right up to me, and I'll get them seated and try not to embarrass them too much. So my name is Jim Dolson. I work in the business school here. I teach. I'm an adjunct here. I've been teaching here since 2014. Teaching for Dr. Chan. And actually, I got to know Dr. Chan. I was superintendent at Jackson Christian School for a number of years, and we were working together on a project. He was helping us do a SWOT analysis, as a matter of fact, if I remember correctly. So I got to know each other, struck up a conversation about my background, some of the needs here at the college, and I've taught here ever since. I've taught operations and business, operations and production management, that sort of thing, as well as down on the downtown campus, a number of classes in the Masters in Management Leadership program, culture, organizational climate, a number of classes I've taught, research classes, statistics, that's just to name a few of them. It's at other Christian colleges. I work at U.S. Staffing Agency here in Jackson, so I help people get meaningful work, get them back to work, get them in jobs that they like and that sort of thing. But on the side, I teach at Christian universities, MBA programs and bachelor's programs. So at other universities, I've taught business principles classes, accounting, although accounting is probably not my favorite one because I'm not, yeah, there's the accountant right there. Oh, and over there, I know that's an accounting person too. So I'm about at my limit of teaching accounting and really being able to, oh, and there, are you accounting as well? Yes, that's right. So I'm at my limit of my accounting knowledge of teaching it. But anyway, so I have a fun time teaching online, and that's kind of like what I do for a hobby. It's part of my ministry. That's why I teach only at Christian universities. It's part of my ministry, if you will, back to the church. All right. So a little bit more about me, because I think it's important that you understand who I am, so that when we dive into this topic of chaos, you kind of know my background a little bit, so that you understand the lens of how I see the world, so that you, if I say something that sounds a little bit strange, well, maybe you can connect the dots with my own background. So I was raised in a believer's home. I became a believer when I was 15. In fact, I was at a Billy Graham crusade, all right, where I came to know Christ as my Savior. And it was at the now defunct and torn down Pontiac Silverdome. On the 50-yard line, as a matter of fact, when I walked forward and met the counselor and gave my heart to Christ. Right? So that's been my journey for the last, I'm mid-50s now, for the last 40-some years. I've been able to, as a young adult, study God's Word, know it. I'm not an expert in God's Word. Okay, I'll tell you that. But God's Word does speak to me, and I do read it often, daily. And so I've gotten to know God's Word over the years. And one thing I have figured out is this, that when God says something in His Word, it is true. Story of creation, for example, when God said He made it in 7 days, criticize me if you want, I believe 7 days. When God said it was good, it was good. It was just to His perfect and pleasing will. It was good, meaning it was ordered. It was just the way He wanted it. However, He created us, and we created His universe. We kind of took His universe and made it ugly. So we're going to bump up against a few topics in the next few minutes, or a couple of topics that we're just going to stay away from, but I just want to let you know that I'm aware of them. One of the topics is whenever you talk about chaos and you talk about God's order and you talk about His universe and how He created it and how we made it disorderly again, you get into this topic of what about God's sovereign will versus man's free will? And so, like I have this coin. It's just a great analogy. It's like trying to have this coin have both faces up at the same time. One side being God's sovereignty, His will be done in spite of us, versus the other side, He gives us a free will. How can both of those be true at the same time and both be face up? So we're going to bump into that topic a little bit. I'm just going to ask you to set it off to the side because we're not going to really get into that. I just want to acknowledge that when we talk about chaos in our world, we have to acknowledge our own, contribution to the word chaos. The second thing we're going to bump up against and not talk about is why do, this age-old question, why do horrific things happen to godly people? Why does a sovereign God allow that to happen? And the answer is, I don't know. We're not going to talk about it here. I will tell you, though, what I believe. While God made a perfect universe, made it orderly, we made it dirty again. We created disorder, okay? And so things aren't exactly the way God made them. So it's kind of with that I started as an introduction to talk about this topic of chaos in our world. Now, I use the word perceived chaos. And I use it very intentionally because I don't think chaos really exists in the universe the way that sometimes we throw that word around. All right? So I use the word, it's perceived chaos. It looks like chaos. So that's kind of what we're going to dive into, is specifically what it looks like inside of a business, inside of an organization. So this is what we're going to, if my clicker will, I guess I got to turn it on first. There we go. So this is kind of the agenda for the next few minutes. We're going to look at a framework of chaos. We're going to build it qualitatively. So I've looked at a number of articles. I'm just going to take you through what I found about chaos and chaos theory, kind of mesh it together and create a little bit of a framework that we can talk about chaos through. Then we're going to create a framework of organizational culture. So I've got a number of texts that I've been using, studying organizational culture, organizational climate, and I want to present that to you in a framework that we can look at. And then, number 3, we're going to build like this integrated framework. We're going to take this chaos framework that I'm going to show you, and we're going to take this framework of organizational culture, we're just kind of lay them on top of each other, okay? And then that's going to create us a lens that we can look through. Now, if you were alive in the mid-80s, and you are not, some of you were, you probably went to, or maybe you've seen the reruns, of that famous Ghostbusters movie with Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray. And there's the famous line, "Don't cross the streams, or else what happens?" Nobody saw the movie. Bad things could happen. So that's a little picture of them trying not to cross the stream. So in this few minutes, the streams are chaos in that framework and this framework of organizational culture. But what happens when you put them together? What do you get? So we're going to look at some businesses through this combined stream of a framework, an integrated framework. Look at some examples. I've got 3 businesses we're going to look at. They're relevant businesses. They're ones that 2 for sure you recognize, maybe not the other one. And we're just going to see, does chaos really exist? Or is it perceived chaos? And then, so that you've got something to walk away with, I'm going to suggest some tools to you that you can use either, if you're working in a business right now, you certainly will be after you graduate, okay? Some tools that you can have in your pocket that will help you understand this perceived chaos that's going on, and then, maybe change it as well. Questions before we go on? Anybody? Any question? How about ask me what's my favorite sports college? I'm a U of M fan. They know that because I have in class. And if you're a Michigan State fan, I'm sorry. Okay. I just couldn't help myself. I had to throw that in. So we're going to do a little bit of a qualitative analysis of the word chaos. Now, for this focus series, and forgive me, I'm not sure exactly who wrote this, but they wrote it pretty well. Chaos is a lack of order, or at least behaviors, so that it's unpredictable. They appear to be random. So behaviors appear to be random. They appear to be unpredictable. But is anything really or truly chaotic? We use that term a lot. We use that word chaos a lot. Is it really truly chaotic? Or do we simply just not have the capacity to see the patterns that are in front of us? All right? So that's one definition of chaos. Another one. Now this is by a very secular group called the Fractal Foundation. They're very science-oriented. They say chaos is the science of surprises. The science of surprises. So it almost means like surprises can be figured out. Surprises are a little bit, you can investigate them and find a root cause or find find a cause for something. So chaos is the science of surprises. It's of the nonlinear and the unpredictable. These phenomena are often described by fractal mathematics. Don't worry, we're not doing any fractal mathematics problems in here because I don't know how to solve them either. But just be aware that there's a specialty branch of mathematics called fractal mathematics that is required to figure this kind of stuff out. Now, you may have seen this kind of a design before. Where have you seen it? What's that?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. We vacation in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. We walk along the beach and we find shells that look just like this. I think this is called a Fibonacci series. It's a very non-linear way of looking and describing a shell with that little series. If you look at sunflower seeds, also have that kind of a Fibonacci approach, which is the radius keeps getting different and different and wider and wider and wider. What they suggest is that you need a different branch of mathematics to really describe that. Okay? Although it looks nonlinear, or it is nonlinear, it's not random. Here's another description. This magical image, written by a guy named Gleek. So he's written on chaos and chaos theory. He's fairly prevalent out there. He says this magical image revealed the fine structure hidden within a stream of data. Now, before we go any further, it's hard to see perhaps from your seats, but this is actually a time series lapse of 2 or 3 variables fighting against each other, and they keep looping. And they make like this owl-looking picture, or if you're very creative and you understand chaos theory a little bit, it looks a little bit like a butterfly, which is kind of ironic, because some people say, oh, chaos is when a butterfly flaps its wings in Africa and suddenly there's a hurricane eventually in America. All right? So this is actually, though, a time-lapse series of variables who are changing, and they just keep repeating themselves. Revealing that fine structure required a different technique. So imagine this whole stream of data coming in, and it's just flowing in. You can't see this unless you have a different technique to evaluate it. You need a different lens to look through. Okay? So, some of the words you pick out of there. There's a lack of order that's unpredictable. There's a disorderly stream of data. These are all the different observations that you can make when you see chaos. You can see chaos. You can see the evidence of it. It appears to be random. Maybe it's not. It looks to be nonlinear. Now, just because something is not linear, or just because something is nonlinear, doesn't mean you can't figure it out. It's not random, it's nonlinear. There are changing relationships. These are all quotes from those phrases I just showed you. Changing relationships implies that these variables are connected to each other. Okay, that there is a relationship between them that can be described. All 3 of those also had this idea of we don't have the capacity to see what's in front of us. It's hidden. It takes a little bit something different to see the data for what it really is. Okay? And then by your normal, just stuff that you know, you can't quite figure it out. If you put all that together, there's 3 themes that seem to bubble up here. That there's this evidence of disorder. So I put that in quotes. It's disorder because it's evidence of what we think and what we would call is disorder. But there's also this pattern to this disorder. Now, if a stream of data has a pattern to it, it's not really in disorder. It's just that we can't see it using whatever tools that we have. So there's this pattern to this disorder. And one of the challenges is, for this pattern of orderliness, is to find out what's hidden inside of it. Okay, it's like you have to shake up the data and look at it differently in order to see what's really hidden inside of it. Now it's at this point, you kind of have to make a binary decision. Choice 1. You believe that the universe really is disordered, and it was created that way. In fact, it wasn't created at all. You might believe in that event that things just happen randomly, just by chance, because your universe is disordered. Or you could believe what I believe, and that things don't happen randomly, but that God is in fact in charge of it because he created an ordered universe. So you got a couple of choices when you think about this. Is it really disordered, or does it just appear to be disordered? So that gets us to this framework. There are certainly evidences of things being disordered. No doubt about it. Okay? And I'm going to show you some examples out of business that very much are disordered and appear to be chaotic. And in one sense, we'll say that it's chaotic. That organization is chaotic. Okay? So there's certainly evidences of disorder, unpredictableness, the surprise element. But then you get to make a choice. Are you going to accept the universe as being disordered? And if you do, I would suggest to you that you accept the idea of true chaos, that nothing is in control of it, that it just happens, that life just happens to you. In fact, I would suggest that if you believe in this top rung, your favorite words are, it is what it is. You're a victim all the time. It is what it is. The universe is disordered. There's a sense of hopelessness. Why take any action? Because it doesn't make a difference anyways. Life is completely random. It doesn't really matter what I do. That's option one in this framework. Option two is you accept that the universe is in fact ordered by God is what I believe, and you reject the idea of chaos. You put aside this issue of randomness, and instead you say there's a cause to this disorder. There's a reason out there that things are the way they are. It's not just this randomness that happens. So if you believe like this, you would start looking for those hidden causes, those things that are buried deep that are maybe not easy to find. You take action. You don't believe in that mantra of it is what it is. You have a sense of hope because of that. Questions before I move on? This can be interactive. All right, we're going to set this aside for a moment. So this is the framework of chaos, perceived chaos that we're talking about. Let's talk about organizations for a moment. Whoops, here we go. So organizations are made of people. I know it seems like I'm Captain Obvious here, but organizations are made up of people. And when we talk about organizational culture, it's really the intersection of a couple of other things at the same time. There's organizational identity, and there's organizational discourse or language. They're all combining together to work in this thing called organizational culture. When you look at organizational culture a little bit closer, you find out that, and this, you think about Spring Arbor for just a moment. Think about some of the jargon, the slang, the gestures, the stories, the procedures and policies that are in place here. Those are all evidence of a culture at work. Well, what about this thing, identity? So the class I teach on Monday nights, there's a number of student athletes in there. And I know that when they go to an event someplace to run track or whatever, they represent Spring Arbor University. Okay? They are identified with Spring Arbor University. And they're expected to act like they are students from Spring Arbor University. So as much as they're a part of the university is a part of them. Dare I say that if the university changed its identity, some of you probably wouldn't be here. If suddenly you came to school tomorrow and they said, we are no longer a Christian university, my guess is some of you would leave, if not most of you. That's because Christianity is part of our identity here. And to remove it would mean to remove part of our culture. What about this thing of language? So this is always really interesting to me. We vacation, like I said, down in North Carolina quite often, down at the Outer Banks. And when we're traveling down to the Outer Banks, we go through Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, and all those states. And if I say the word DC, and I'm in Virginia, what's the first thing you think of? Washington, D.C. It's on the road signs everywhere. It's between people in that part of the country. If you say D.C. and you're living in Maryland, oh yeah, you're talking about Washington, D.C. If I'm on campus up here, on Spring Arbor's campus, and I say the word D.C., what do you think of?
Lunch. Where do you eat?
Lunch, dining commons. That's an example of how words are between us. Like, we never have to express the fact that when I say D.C., I'm talking about food. I'm thinking about where I'm going to get my next meal. It's at the D.C., all right? So words tend to be between us in a culture. They're only partially verbalized. And they're very subtle, right? So that's what happens when you're part of a culture. These words tend to be between you. All right. Questions on that? Let's keep going. So how does organizational culture form? This is just one view of it. There are many views of it. Organizations, of course, are made up of people. You all are part of the culture here at Spring Arbor. In fact, the culture at Spring Arbor might not be exactly the same if any of you were not here. That's because collectively, you individually have a particular worldview, like you believe. Hopefully you've thought about this before. By now, especially if you're older, if you're a junior or senior here, you ought to know, hey, I got to answer questions like, why am I here? Where did I come from? What's eternity like for me? Where am I going? Those are all your view of reality, your worldview, if you will. Well, one researcher says, hey, that view of reality informs your belief system. Informs what you think, not just about the world, but like what you think about the world around you, what you think about God. Or maybe you don't think about God because of your view of reality. It's still a belief system. So your view of reality informs your beliefs. Your beliefs inform your values. Your values, in turn, shape your behaviors. So if you see someone's behavior, if you could really do this, you ought to be able to take their behavior, pull it out like a string through this stack, and you should be able to see, oh, they did that behavior because of this value. They did that value because of this belief. And they have those beliefs because this is their view of reality. Okay? Formation of organizational culture. And when you walk in the front door of any business, when you walk in the front door of this university, you're carrying all this stuff with you along with everybody else. So sometimes it's not surprising that we have conflicts, right? Same is true in any business. All right. So, observations about organizational culture. When you're on the outside, it's pretty easy to see these. When you're on the inside, it's not always easy to see these because you get used to them. They become like the wallpaper. But symbols, slogans, and stories are all part of the artifacts of the culture here. The tower outside is an example of a symbol of this university. Has anybody stopped to look at that tower? What's written on the side of it? Anybody know?
The Wesleyan Quadrilateral.
Yeah, say it again.
The Wesleyan Quadrilateral.
The Wesleyan Quadrilateral, yes. I couldn't have said that straight because I don't know it. But I read it before, but it's an important symbol of this university. I would say if that clock tower ever got torn down, you would know it and you'd wondered what was going on. Like, this is part of our symbology. Why is it not here? Or that rock. Isn't there a rock out front? That's part of it. That's a symbol. Yes, ma'am.
That was on my exam, the Wesleyan Quadrilateral.
All right. So we have these symbols and slogans all around us that sometimes we don't even recognize are part of our culture, but there's also rituals, ceremonies, and heroes. For the heroes, for example, might be the people who helped start this university back in the day, so to speak. Okay? Now, whenever you're inside of an organization and you're part of the culture, you have three choices on how to change it. You can conform, which simply means you go along with the flow. You're not going to change it. You're just going to stick to it the way it is. You're a conformist. Okay? I'm not suggesting being a conformist is wrong. It's just you're not going to take on the battle. You're just going to live whatever it is you're living, and you're going to keep doing it with that organization. You can resist it. Oftentimes that means quitting the organization. It might mean you get fired from an organization. Or you can negotiate it, which means you stay inside of it and you work to change it from the inside. So conformity, resistance, and negotiation are the ways that you engage with the culture to make a change to it. So you notice these are not my thoughts. I'm just putting them together. I've got references on here, so if you ever want to check them out or ask me about it, I'm willing to do that. So I'm really big on, I don't care about people's opinions. I want to know what the research says in this kind of a setting. Okay, so I'm not giving you my opinion here. I'm simply telling you what the research says and I've been able to put together. So we've got these two streams, these two different frameworks, one on chaos, one on organizational culture. And now we're going to do the good old Ghostbusters thing, and we're going to cross them to see what happens. Because I would say that in order for us to really understand culture and this idea of perceived chaos, we need to overlay these two frameworks on top of each other and see if there's like an integrated framework that exists. So it looks like this. Again, just in the view of organizational culture, there is evidence of disorder. We can't deny that. There are surprises that happen every day in businesses. There's lack of predictable behavior by people when they show up in the front door of your business. But then you make a choice. Hey, am I going to believe that culture can't be changed? Am I one of these folks that says, you know what, disordered organizational culture is just the way it is, and I have no ability to change it? Well, you accept this disorder as a status quo. You just simply live with it. And you take no action, and your favorite words again are, it is what it is. And you go on with your day and you never change it. In this instance, you're a conformist. You're just going to let the culture form you and you're going to keep going. The other choice, the one that I seem to favor, and I hope that you do too, is you accept that organizational culture is ordered. It can be changed. Status quo is not a word that you use. You look for these artifacts to explain this disorder that you view over here. And from that, you take charge. You take on the culture. You either resist it or you negotiate it. Okay, so this is the overlaid framework on top of the organizational culture overlaid on top of a chaos. We're going to focus on this for a moment. So we're going to create a little lens to look at some businesses. And that lens looks like this. We're going to look for the evidence of disorder in an organization. Then we're going to look to see what artifacts can we pick up out of the news to explain that disorder. And then we're going to look at what did that organization do to either resist or negotiate that disorder at the other end. Okay, you with me so far? Now, don't fall asleep on me because it's only 11:45. We'll probably be done before 11:15. Tesla. Somebody tell me about Tesla, first of all. Who knows anything about Tesla? Raise your hand. Tesla. Tell me about Tesla.
It's an electric car or something like that.
Electric cars. The list is longer than electric cars.
Okay.
Somebody else. What else does Tesla do? Yeah.
CEO Elon Musk runs SpaceX on the side.
SpaceX. Okay. What else does Tesla do? Yeah.
Solar roofs.
Yes. What else does Tesla do? Batteries. These are the things that Tesla gets involved with primarily through their CEO's creativity, Elon Musk, okay? Well, if you've been keeping track of Tesla at all in the news in the last 4 months, you would know that there's a fair amount of disorder going on there, as exampled. So I didn't check it when I walked in past the ticker room over there, but as of a few days ago, their stock price was $260, down from a high of way up here, like a $319 or whatever it was. All right? Something's not right at Tesla when your stock drops that quick, when you have all those businesses going. from the New York Times, October 1st, unraveling the Tesla mystery. Lots and lots of parked cars out there, these brand new, what are they called, Series 3, Model 3, cars, beautiful cars, really good acceleration, nice cars, lots and lots of parked cars. Evidence being posted online has raised questions about production, logistics, quality, and even demand. Okay, there isn't a car manufacturer alive today, because they would be out of business, that makes cars just to park them in a parking lot. Now sometimes they build too much inventory and they have to sell them off, but not usually this way. These are also hidden, like they don't want them to be found. Something's going on at Tesla. There's some disorder going on there. Back in June, Tesla said, hey, we're going to slash 10% of our workforce. Gone. They're going to be gone. Investors are worried about the company going through cash like it's just water. They're just shredding dollar bills over there. Okay? Something's going on at Tesla. Well, look no further than the artifacts. All right, Elon Musk. You mentioned Elon Musk, right? Okay. Pressure mounts on Tesla as it gets hit with a third securities fraud lawsuit. So back in early August, I think, Elon Musk, Tesla's a publicly traded company. Elon Musk says, hey, I'm going to buy back all the stock. I've already got an investor. I want to buy it back from the public offering. Well, when he did that, his stock price went up significantly. People who were going to short sell the company lost a lot of money. They went to the SEC and they sued. We'll get to that in a minute. So look no further than Elon Musk when you talk about some of the chaos that's going on. And then, oh, by the way, if you didn't see this, he was on a podcast, I don't know, mid-August, I think, and came out, maybe it was in September, actually. He's on there drinking whiskey and smoking marijuana. Now, this is the CEO of a significant company in public bragging about this kind of behavior. Then there's this one. So you remember the 20 students, 20 Thai soccer students who were trapped in a cave. Y'all heard about that? Well, Elon Musk was one of the people who rushed to them and said, hey, I'm going to build he called it a youth-sized sub to get them out, one or two at a time. All right? In the meantime, this guy up here figured out a way to get them out. Okay, and they got them out. Well, they got all the students out, and Elon Musk said, well, my work here is done. I've done it. He took credit for it. This guy said, what do you mean you did? You didn't do anything. You had an idea, but you didn't deliver on it. You didn't do anything. This played out very publicly, and this is one of the memes I found. So what does Elon Musk do? He says, sorry, pedophile guy. So he accused that guy of being a pedophile. Again, evidence, that things are amuck over at Tesla is directly on this leader's shoulders. He's discredited himself and his whole company. All right, those are some of the artifacts. Now, what has been done to counteract some of that bad behavior? Well, the SEC said, sorry, buddy, you owe us $20 million. And by the way, this is a resistance tactic. By the way, you can't be chairman of your own board anymore. You have to step down. It gets better. His HR person left in September. A month after he started, he quit. It's like the CFO walked out after a month. Because again, these are resistance strategies, resistance tactics that people inside the organization took. Said, we're done with you. We're leaving. All right? Let's look at another company. This one is just amazing to me. CBS. Raise your hand if you've heard CBS in the news in the last 5 or 6 months. Okay? So some of this isn't going to be a surprise to you if you've been keeping track of it. So, evidence of the disorder. The 60 Minutes guy who runs the whole 60 Minutes program and has for decades, they terminated my contract early because I sent a text message to one of our own CBS reporters. Well, it was a threatening text message. It wasn't just a text message, okay? That was in September. He's gone. Charlie Rose, gone. because of sexual harassment by 3 former coworkers. That was in May. Evidence of disorder at CBS. Well, let's look to see why. So there's this ritual that seems to be promoted, not a good ritual, promoted by the head guy himself, who's now gone, Les Moonves. Chief executive of the CBS Corporation, one of the most powerful people in the media business, is facing an investigation after a report published Friday revealed allegations of sexual harassment made by 6 women. One woman, a victim, said, "I had been there long enough to know that it was just the way things were. People did what they wanted to you. People did what they wanted to you." She's a victim. This is evidence, again, of upheaval. There is a culture of sexual harassment at CBS that eventually came out. What happened? What did people do? Did they resist and negotiate? So this is actually a copy of the lawsuit of the women against Charlie Rose. They resisted. They said, "We're going to stand up and fight this." For its part, CBS said, "You're gone, Charlie Rose. You're gone, Les Moonves. You're gone, Jeff Fogger. So you're gone." All right? That was their way of resisting. So again, you can see there's disorder, but it's created by us. It's not a natural disorder. Okay? Let's look at one more example, Starbucks. How many people bought a Starbucks today? Anybody? Probably not here. I don't think there's one on campus here. So, evidence of disorder at Starbucks. Let's see. Stock is down. The market's up, their stock is down. Something's going on. What kind of disorder is going on over there at Starbucks? Well, you all heard about this one. Arrest of 2 black men at Starbucks for trespassing sparks protests. There's a picture of, I think, the day after this happened. All right? There is certainly unrest. There is chaos going on at Starbucks. Let's look a little bit closer, see if we can find the hidden meaning behind that, some of these artifacts. So, Starbucks, one of their rituals to fix problems is to train people. So they took a whole day, trained 8,000 people. Didn't work. Okay? Starbucks to close 8,000 U.S. stores for racial bias training. Just doing training is not enough. It's just window dressing, especially if you're trying to fix things like gender or racial bias. All right? Again, think about their culture. The ritual is, let's train our way out of it. Not saying that they didn't mean well, because they certainly did. They just pushed the wrong buttons. What about this one? This is back in 2015. I'd forgotten about this. They aimed to spark a national conversation, they weren't ready for it, about race relations by having their baristas write the phrase, "race together" on the Starbucks cups. It was a huge failure. Didn't work. They were embarrassed tremendously. They were asking people who were not ready to have these conversations with other people. And it was a disaster. Again, they meant well, but it didn't. They used their culture, their typical go-to ritual of training and taking on the hard conversations as a way to do this, and it failed miserably. So, if you've ever seen The Office, and you've seen the Diversity Day version of it, you will just cringe when you see it. Because it is like, you just takes you, I remember, I think it was back in the late 80s, we had Diversity Day training with the place that I worked, and it was totally useless. And so when I saw this version, when I saw this on The Office, it's like, yeah, it brought back those same uncomfortable, crazy, not good feelings, it's just not working kind of thing. Well, Starbucks is closing all its U.S. stores for Diversity Training Day. They did it. That's not enough. Decades of research show that one-time corporate training programs, their ritual for their culture, doesn't work. Doesn't work. So, what are they doing now, resisting and negotiating? Here's what they're doing. They're actually doing a number of things. So they're saying, hey, training is only the beginning. They are negotiating their way through changing their culture. And they're saying, hey, training is just the start. They've changed their policy. Customers don't have to buy coffee now to sit in a Starbucks. New guidelines for calling 911. So not anybody, not any employee can just pick up the phone now and dial 911. There are some guidelines to do that. And they're going to spend some time identifying which, they being Starbucks corporate, Starbucks people, identifying which practices really have to be trained with people, and is it appropriate to train them. Okay, again, that's an example of a company who's trying to figure it out. There was some disorder. They uncovered what it was by looking at the artifacts, and now they're trying to change it. All right, so that's kind of like the two different frameworks overlaid on top of each other, just looking at three different companies, all right? So, again, you have some choices, some taking some action in your organization or wherever you're going to work. You can either accept disorder as you see it and say, oh, can't do anything about it, I'm just going to conform to it. I'm just going to live with it. Or you're going to say, hey, listen, we can do better. We're going to accept that this culture can be organized, can be ordered. And we're going to look for the artifacts that tell us why it's disordered, and we're going to go fix them. So let's talk about some things you can do. Just a reminder, so culture is closely tied to identity and discourse, and it's really tied to your values and beliefs as people individually when you walk in the front door of your organization. Okay? So here's some things you can do. Oh, yeah, before I get there, you got to remember that because we are talking about people, changing culture is not a technical challenge. It is not the kind of thing where you can call a subject matter expert in to change you. You can't call a software dude to come in and fix this problem. You can't hire a consultant with a specific set of skills to fix this problem. This is what's called an adaptive challenge, okay? Which requires you to address priorities, beliefs, values, the way you think about the world. These are not solved in a single training session. It's called an adaptive challenge. So, here's thing number one you can do. This sounds so simple, but it's research-based and it works. Change the discourse, change the language, and you'll change the culture. Change the discourse, and you'll change the culture. Use and repeat words that express the change that you want to make. I'll give you an example. So where I work, we call people employees. We used to call them employees. We talked about what term do we really want to call people that work here. Employees feels like there's an employer and employee, right? That there's this gap. We talked about the word associate. What comes to mind when I say the word associate to you?
Work together.
What? Anybody?
Like a friend,
What's that?
maybe a friend,
Maybe a friend?
someone you know.
You ever walk into Walmart? What do they have there? Associates. When you walk into Walmart, they're not called employees, they're called associates. We didn't like that because it felt like it created this alignment. If we use the word associates because of the language, it creates this alignment with Walmart, which we don't necessarily always agree with. We wanted to distance ourselves from Walmart in our company. So we instead use the words team member. So now, whenever I write documents, whenever I talk to people, we don't call them employees, we don't call them associates, we call them team members. And we just keep repeating that and repeating that and repeating that. Another idea. When someone says something negative in a conversation when you're at work, you can counter that with something positive. You don't have to play in to the negative language that's going on. If you want to create a positive culture where you're at, a positive work environment, which is a climate issue, start saying things that are positive to other people, countering the negative things that are going on. Okay? That's tool number one. Tool number two. 2 and 3 are somewhat related. Change the identity of where you're at, and you'll change the culture. Like I said, if you came here tomorrow and this was no longer a Christian university, the identity of this organization has changed, and the culture will soon follow. Ask Harvard. That's what happened to them a while ago. My battery is running low, so I guess we are getting close to being done. We're almost done. So you can do this a couple different ways. There's a tool called appreciative inquiry, which basically asks employees to dream and think about what their company could be. This is not necessarily the leaders doing it. This is employees doing it. This is you when you work at a company. Ask, hey, what could we really be if we really tried? What would you like this company to be? It's that kind of speak. Changing the identity. Transformative cooperation is somewhat related. This is when people pool their knowledge, their skills, their passions together to create a change. I'm showing a picture of an avalanche over there. I'm not sure if it's quite obvious. One or two people can really start a change inside of a company, a big change. We're going to ask you a little test question. In the last 12 months, 13 months, there's a huge example of transformative cooperation in our society. What is it? And it just went out. Sorry, I'm done with it. What is it? Starts with a hashtag. Me too. Me too is the ideal example of what happens when one or two people resist the culture that they're in their organizations, and say, no more, we're done with it. Okay? Sorry, the battery ran out. So, we got about 10 minutes or so left. Questions, comments, what kinds of things are you thinking about when I talk about this? Yeah?
What change? How is Michigan State doing with their change?
You know, I actually had them on the list to do and decided not to because of the whole Michigan and Michigan State game the other day. And yeah, I think you could apply this, though. I started doing it. And they are changing, right? They're going through the whole thing of resisting. They've let some people go, and now they're negotiating. They're changing their policies and that sort of thing.
Or will it change the culture?
Well, time. It's not, that isn't going to happen easily, right? Or short term. Yeah. Yeah. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
What about Saudi Arabia rating?
Oh. Like with our relationship with them because of the journalists?
Well, all of the other nations' relationship as well. We're seeing a lot of investments being pulled out because of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, even the guy here before, Mark Edwards, talked about the Arab Spring 2 or 3 years ago. That was an example of a transformative cooperation movement that took over that part of the world. Okay, so yeah, we'll wait and see with Saudi Arabia as well. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
Would you say that since like most people like they carry different views of reality and like that transforms into their actions, that would cause chaos within an organization also, like just the differing like opinions and things like that?
That's a good question. So if you imagine for a moment, all of us in here, if we worked in a business, while we may share some common views of reality, the higher you go in that topology from view of reality to belief to values to actions, eventually our actions start to come like this, even though we still have a common belief down here, and it will cause conflict. But is it true chaos? No. It's the perceived chaos. It is disorder, but it can be fixed. Okay, now Starbucks tried to fix it by just doing that one thing, that training thing. They found out that's not the way to do it. They had to actually do other things as well. So yeah, it can definitely create disorder. That would be like some of the evidence of disorder that we'd look at. Yeah. Yeah.
So your point basically is that chaos could be explained, but what happens if it's like there's a business and the economic outside economic settings just kind of like fall?
Mm-hmm.
Like, could you say that's just chaotic and there's no way to explain that, or could there be an internal explanation? Say like.
I'm going to say one word. I'm going to say two words: GM and Ford. Okay, so during the economic crisis of 2008, who went bankrupt? That's because their culture was a lot different than Ford's. Why didn't Ford go bankrupt? Anybody know? Because they saved money. They were reducing the cost of their products. They were ready. Aaliyah, they had a culture that said, hey, we're going to prepare for this day. They weren't lucky. GM was just big and arrogant. Ford, big, not quite as arrogant. They were ready for it, and they didn't need a government bailout because of it. Okay? Don't get me started on that topic. Yep.
What would you say is the balance between the speaking positively to change the culture and resisting? You have a sports team and the coach is a jerk, recruit's bad, your record's terrible,
Right.
terrible player. You just take
Or you kneel during the national anthem.
But yeah, so what's how do you
Yeah.
this while being positive?
So yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not defending kneeling or not kneeling. So that's not going to be the discussion. But what you saw demonstrated was somebody who decided to resist the culture in an effort to change it. And in his case, it cost him his job.
Even if we didn't do that, what would this conversation with players do? Guys, we need to
Yeah, I mean,
get on everything, or-
yeah. So I think like a lot of the research would say, the more positive things you can say, but you have to be genuine in it as well. You can't just speak good words. And I guess I didn't throw that up there, but there's always this. We all know when people are just blowing smoke at us with their good words, right? I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They're just not being genuine. So when I say that you have to talk positive things, you have to be earnest about it, like on purpose. And who knows? Maybe Colin Kaepernick was doing that. I don't know. Hard to know. But that does take time. Kneeling seemed to, the resistance part of it was quicker for him. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah.
Just thinking, basically, you're talking about GM and Ford. Look how they were created. One was a person control freak. He wanted to control everything, had no debt. He wanted to control where he got the rubber, where he got the steel, the boats, and everything else. And the other was created over 4 years, buying new business every 4 days.
Right.
And so they had a lot of debt. And so it was geared to debt, outside control. Actually, DuPont actually controlled for about 4 years. But anyways, so we have a different beginning and a different result now. So what they started with 100 years ago was being seen with
And it bred a different culture as well inside. Like, hey, this debt's fine. We'll be fine. We are, what was the word for GM? We are too big to fail. You never heard that coming from Ford Motor Company. I can tell you, after working with Ford and GM, Ford was very, very, very difficult to work with. They were so insistent on price and saving money. Not necessarily true with GM.
Ford is the best seller
So-
company.
Some would say.
No,
All right.
I work for Ford, so that's what I believe.
All right, good. All right, anything else? Any questions? All right, thank you for being here.